Hi guys, welcome to NTI day 25, and we're still going to be doing some mixed review today. And our first 5 questions, as you can see, are a little bit of computation. So we've got some dividing fractions, we've got some adding decimals, multiplying, dividing decimals. So if you have graph paper at home, I would highly recommend you get it out for this assignment, but if you don't, that's okay. Just make sure that you keep it all nice and neat when we get to those decimals, okay? All right, so we're going to start with number 1. And number 1 is one of our dividing fractions problems. And if you remember from back in class when we did this back in the fall, there are 3 simple rules for dividing fractions, and that is keep, change, flip. Okay. Remember, we're going to keep the first fraction. We're going to change our division to multiplication, and then we're going to flip our second fraction. We're going to call it the reciprocal, and we're just going to multiply straight across. Now, one more thing to remember is that anytime we're dealing with fractions, our answer is not final till it's in simplest form. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write our original problem. Remember, don't skip any steps. That's how you get messed up. If you're trying to skip steps, usually you forget to flip that second fraction. So rewrite the original problem, and so we have 2/5 divided by 2/3. And we're going to follow our keep, change, flip policy. I'm going to keep 2/5. I'm going to change division to multiplication. And then I'm going to flip 2/3 to its reciprocal to become 3/2. Now, to multiply fractions, we're just going to multiply straight across. 2 times 3 gives us 6. 5 times 2 gives us 10. Now, 6/10 is not our final answer. We've got to simplify 6/10. So when I look at 6 and I look at 10, they're both even numbers, so I know they can both be simplified or reduced by 2. So we take our numerator, 6 divided by 2, and I get 3. And then 10 divided by 2, and I get 5. I can't simplify 3/5 any further, so 3/5 is our final answer. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Let's take a look at number 2. We're still dividing fractions here, but number 2 is a little bit different because we have a mixed number for our first piece. Okay. Now remember, dividing fractions, we're going to keep, change, flip. So go ahead and rewrite your original problem first. So we have 2 1/3 divided by 1/3. Now this is where it gets really important that we don't start skipping steps, okay? We can't divide our mixed number, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn it into an improper fraction. To turn our mixed number into an improper fraction, we take our denominator, 3, times our whole number, 2, plus our numerator, 1. So we have 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 gives us 7, and then we just keep our original denominator of 3. So we have 7/3 divided by 1/3. So that's the first step, is to go ahead and change that mixed number into an improper fraction. Now is when we're going to do our keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep 7/3. I'm going to change division to multiplication. And then I'm going to flip 1/3 to become 3/1. Now we have a fraction times a fraction, so we're just going to multiply. 7 times 3 is 21. 3 times 1 is 3. Now, we are not going to leave our answer as 21/3 because that's an improper fraction. So we need to simplify. We need to see how many times does 3 go into 21. 3 goes into 21 7 whole times with none left over. So our final answer is 7. Okay. All right. So let's go take a look at number 3. Now, number 3 is a adding decimals problem. So there's a couple things you need to remember. When we're adding decimals, we're going to line up our decimal points. So that's the first place we're going to start. And like I said, this is where your graph paper is going to come in handy. But if you don't have any, that's okay. You can just use regular line paper. Just make sure you're nice and neat when you're lining these numbers up. Okay. So we have we have 1.8. And remember, we're lining up the decimal points, so I want one number per box. So then I have 13.75, and I have 0.0874. I'm going to add all of those up. Now, after we add in our decimal points, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put in some zeros as placeholders so it's easy to see and just add straight down the columns. So behind my first number here, I need 3 zeros for placeholders. Behind my second number, I need 2 zeros for placeholders. And then in that third number, I don't need any placeholders because that's our longest decimal point. Now, all we have to do is add straight down the columns and then drop down our decimal point. So we have 0 plus 0 plus 4 leaves us with a 4. 0 plus 0 plus 7 leaves us with a 7. 0 plus 5 plus 8 is 13. I got to carry my 1. Don't forget about that. And now I have 1 plus 8 plus 7, and that gives us 16. Carry my 1. As I'm going there, I see my decimal point, so I need to drop it straight down. And then I have 1 plus 1 plus 3, and that's my 5. And then I have just a 1. Okay, so our final answer is 15.6374. All right, number 4. Number 4 is when we're going to be multiplying decimals. And when we're multiplying decimals, still going to use that graph paper because it's easy to get our numbers mixed up here. But we don't have to line up the decimal point. We just have to line up our numbers, multiply like normal, and then we're going to deal with that decimal point at the end. So I'm going to put one number per box here. I've got 1.5 times 3.75. And again, like I said, we don't have to line up those decimal points because if you remember, when we multiply decimals, we're just going to count at the end how many places are behind the decimal and then insert it into our answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by saying, and guys, I'm actually going to move this over some because we might need some more room. 1.5 times 3.75. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start and we're going to take this first number here, this 5, we're going to multiply it towards everything on the top row. So 5 times 5 is my 25, carry my 2. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. Now, when we are multiplying multi-digit numbers, whenever we're done with a number, I'm going to mark it out, come down here and put my placeholder 0 because I'm done with that number. I'm also going to mark out my carries because I don't want to get that confused for the next number that I'm working with here. So I'm done with the 5, marked out my carries. Now I'm going to move on to the 7, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take 7 times everything across the top row. 7 times 5 is a 35. So I put my 5 down here, and I'm going to carry my 3. 7 times 1 is 7, plus the 3 I carried gives me a 10. So I put the 0 down here. And I don't have anywhere to carry it, so I'm just going to put my 1 down here as well. Okay. Now, I'm done with 2 numbers this time, so I'm going to put 2 placeholders down here, 2 zeros down here. And I'm also going to mark out my carries so I know that I'm good. Okay. All right, last number that we've got here is a 3, and I'm going to take 3 times everything across the top row. 3 times 5 is 15, carry the 1, and 3 times 1 is 3, plus the 1 I carried is a 4. Okay, now when we get all these numbers down here at the bottom, what we're going to do is we're going to add them up. See, this is why it's important that our numbers are all nice and neat and lined up. Okay, all right, so we have 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 5 plus 0 is 12. Then I have 5 plus 1 is 6. And then 4 plus 1 is 5. Okay. Now, we are not done yet. We have one final step that we need to do is we need to put in our decimal point. And the way that we do that when we're multiplying decimals is we come back up here to our original problem and we count how many places are behind the decimal. So in my first number here, I have 1 place behind the decimal. In my second number, I have 2 places behind the decimal. So that gives me a total of 3 places behind the decimal. So that's how many times I need to move the decimal in my answer. So I'm going to start all the way to the right, and I'm going to move it 1, 2, 3 times. So our final answer is 5.625. All right, moving on to our last really computation question is number 5. Number 5 is when we're dividing decimals. So we need to take a look. Our first number is our dividend. That's going to go inside the box. So we have our 20.05, okay, and we're going to divide that by 2.5. 2.5 is our divisor. It goes on the outside. Now, think back to when we talked about long division and we talked about dividing decimals. There's an algorithm that we're going to use. Okay, first we're going to divide, then we're going to multiply, then we're going to subtract, then we're going to bring down, and then we're going to repeat. And we're going to do that until we're out of numbers here. But when we're dividing decimals, we're going to make our divisor a whole number. So that's the first thing that we need to do, is I need to make 2.5 a whole number. To do that, I would have to swing my decimal point 1 time to the right. Since I'm swinging my decimal point one time to the right in the divisor, I need to do the exact same thing in my dividend. So I'm going to swing that decimal point 1 time to the right, and then I'm going to bring it up into my quotient. Okay, so then we just long divide. First thing I'm going to do is say 25 goes into 2 0 times. Now I'm going to move on. 25 goes into 20 0 times. Now I'm looking at 25 goes into 200 8 times. So now I've divided. Now I'm going to multiply. 25 times 8 is 200. Now I'm going to subtract, and I get a 0. Now I need to bring down. I'm going to bring down my 5. And now I'm going to repeat. Every time you bring down, then you're going to repeat, and you're going to go back up to the original step. 25 goes into 5 0 times. 0 times 25 is 0. Now I'm going to subtract, and I get a 5. Now, if you'll notice, I don't have anything else to bring down. What we're going to do is we're going to add our extra 0 here, because you can add as many zeros as you want to, and the number stays the same, and drop it down. Now we've brought down a 0, and we're going to repeat. Go back up to the top. 25 goes into 50 2 times. 2 times 25 is 50. And I read out of room here. But if we subtract, we get a 0. So we know that that's our final answer. We know that we're done. So 20.05 divided by 2.5 is 8.02. Okay. All right, guys. So those are our first 5 computation questions. I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. So those are your questions for 1 through 5. If you need help with questions 6 through 10, there's a second video link for you to watch.